Data centers could be bigger than oil? That's not the question. The president says data centers could be bigger than oil in Texas. That is quite a sentence. Texas has oil, Texas has oil people, Texas has oil money, Texas has oil hats. I'm pretty sure you can buy an oil-scented candle somewhere here in Texas if you look hard enough. So when somebody says data centers could be bigger than oil, what they're really saying is this: AI is no longer just an app on your phone. It's becoming an industrial project. It needs land, water, transmission lines, gas turbines, tax deals, local permits, and enough electricity to make people who run the power grids sit down before they answer the phone. And now, Texas, one of the friendliest places on earth for big business, is hitting pause on new data center connections while it audits that these projects are actually asking for from the grid. Now that should get everybody's attention. Not because data centers are bad, not because AI is going away, and not because every building full of servers is secretly a villain lair with good Wi-Fi, but because we have reached the part of the AI story where somebody has to pay the electric bill. President Trump said Texas being against data centers was a mistake. He said communities that want them will get money. He described data centers as tremendously important to the economy and said they could be bigger than oil. They could be huge. Now, let's be fair about what he's saying. Data centers do bring investment, construction work, property taxes, infrastructure, some high-paying technical jobs for certain towns, especially towns that have been waiting for a long time. That can matter. And the United States needs computing capacity. AI services run somewhere. Cloud storage runs somewhere. The photos we take, the movies we stream, the business software we use, the increasingly complicated way we order a sandwich, it all runs in data centers. So this is not a technology bad, go live in a cabin conversation. I love air conditioning. I like modern medicine. I'd prefer not to go back to backing up a computer on a stack of floppy disks that weighs as much as a lunchbox. I was there. But data centers bring money is not the end of the conversation. It's the beginning. Because the question is not whether a company can build a giant building. The question is, what does it take from the community? What does it get back? And who's responsible for the math that does not work? Here's the number that made Texas hit the brakes. ERCOT, the organization that runs the electric grid for most of Texas, has been tracking hundreds of gigawatts in requests from very new large electric users. Almost 90% of those requests are from data centers. And if gigawatt means nothing to you, congratulations, you're a normal person. A gigawatt is a lot of electricity. It's the kind of unit you use when you are not deciding whether to run the dishwasher. You use it when you're deciding how to power a small city or an enormous complex of computers, trying to reach AI to teach how to make better sourdough. Texas has more than 400 gigawatts of requests in the pipeline. That is several times larger than the state's record peak demand. Now, important caveat here, requests are not the same thing as projects that will actually be built. A company may ask for capacity years in advance. A project may change. It may get delayed. It may never happen. But still, if you run up the electric grid and 1,800 people show up asking for the keys to a very large truck, you do not just hand them out and hope everybody has watched the safety video. So Governor Abbott ordered an audit. The state wants to know who owns these projects. How much electricity do they really need? How much water will they use? What tax breaks are involved? What will be the impact on the people who already live there? That is not anti-business. That's what due diligence looks like when the business wants enough power to change the future of your region. President Trump also said data centers are becoming like utilities, generating their own electricity on site, keeping the burden off the public grid, maybe even sending excess power back into the system. On paper, that sounds like the answer. If the data center pays for its own power, then regular people do not subsidize it. Great! Everybody wins! The servers hum, the lights stay on, somewhere an executive has a very satisfying PowerPoint slide. But they generate their own power is not a magic phrase. You still have to ask how. Because Amazon is now tied to a planned data center campus in Pecos County, Texas, that would use a giant on-site natural gas plant. The facility is reported to have permits allowing up to 33 million tons of carbon dioxide emissions a year. That is permitted maximum, not a promise that it will emit that much. But the number tells you the scale of the project. And if built as described, it could become the country's largest single source of climate pollution. That's the part that makes the story complicated. Amazon says the plant would be new on-site generation, so it would not raise electricity costs for Texas families. It also says it's exploring solar and battery storage, and it would create thousands of jobs. Those are all things worth examining, but here's the plain English translation. AI needs so much power so quickly that one of the biggest companies in the world may build its own gas-fired power plant to feed its computers. That is not a footnote to the AI boom. That is the AI boom. Now, I've always said the cloud is not a cloud. We use these soft little words for technology, the cloud, the internet, AI. They make it sound like our emails and chatbots live in a pleasant mist above the earth, maybe near the weather. They do not. The cloud is a building full of equipment. The building needs power. The equipment makes heat. The heat has to go somewhere. The power has to be produced. The roads have to handle construction. The local water system may have to support cooling. The grid needs updates. Somebody lives near all of that. And that is why the data center backlash is spreading. People are not necessarily against technology. They're against being told, this will be great for the future, while their question about water, noise, power rates, and local pollution gets answered with a glossy rendering of trees. Nobody wants to be the community that gets the diesel generators, the transmission lines, and the traffic, while somebody else gets the stock bump. And I can completely understand that. Now, data centers do create jobs, but we need to be grown-ups about which jobs we mean. Building a massive campus creates a lot of construction work. That is real work, good work. It matters. Operating the finished facility creates jobs too, but typically not the same number as the construction phase. Once the building is up, it's often a highly automated industrial facility. It does not employ thousands of people forever just because it took thousands of people to build. So when a company says this project will create thousands of jobs, the next question should be, how many construction jobs? How many permanent local jobs? How long do they last? What do they pay? And what does the company owe the community in return for tax breaks, water, land, and power infrastructure? Those are the real questions. That's not hostile. That is the question you ask before you buy a used car. We should probably ask before we hand over a town's future. Bigger than oil? Probably the wrong comparison. Could data centers be bigger than oil? Maybe in investment, maybe in strategic importance, maybe in the effects on the Texas economy. But oil is not just an industry. It's a whole system. Extraction, pipelines, refineries, politics, global markets, jobs, wealth, pollution, and a century of infrastructure built around it. Data centers are becoming that kind of system surprisingly fast. They are not simply tech. They are energy projects, land use projects, water projects, tax policy projects, national security projects, and yes, climate projects. That does not mean Texas should say no to every data center. It means Texas and every other state is right to stop pretending these are just warehouses with nicer cables. A huge data center is an industrial neighbor. It needs an industrial level deal. But what does a fair deal look like? Here's what a community should reasonably ask for before saying yes. First, transparency. Tell people how much power you need, how will you generate it, how much water will you use, and what are you asking for from the public. Second, real protections for local electric customers. If a company needs new transmission or generator, ordinary families should not quietly get that cost folded into their monthly deal. Third, clear rules about backup generators, emissions, noise, and water. Not vague commitments, rules that can be measured. Fourth, job numbers that separate temporary construction work from permanent employment. And fifth, an actual community benefit, not a ribbon cutting, not a website, something concrete, infrastructure, tax revenue, local hiring, emergency planning, support for schools, and services that will carry the impact. If the project is good, it should survive these questions. If it cannot survive those questions, then it was never a very good deal. Listen, I don't think the answer is to be against data centers. I think the answer is to be against magical thinking. AI is going to need places to live, but those places do not float in the clouds. They live in somebody's county, on somebody's grid, near somebody's home, drawing on somebody's water and somebody's air. So if data centers are going to be bigger than oil, then they need to be treated with the same seriousness. Not panic, not a rubber stamp, a real deal in public with the lights on, and preferably enough electricity left over for the rest of us to run the air conditioner. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Subscribe for practical AI and tech explained for people who remember dial-up. Please give me a thumbs up, a like, whatever they're calling it these days, because it really helps, and it helps recommend this to other people that you know. I want to thank you for just being here and going down the middle of the road with me, because some of this stuff is tough to talk about, but we'll get there, right? All right, guys.